So again, welcome to today's session, meeting the 2030 District Challenge with Salmon-Safe. We've got a great panel of speakers here today. Kiki Graham, who serves on the board of the 2030 District and is a project manager with Vulcan. We have Bailey Zach and Anthony Tran with Skanska. Skanska is also an active member of the 2030 District. Our co-hosts are Salmon-Safe. We have Anna Hutto, our certification manager for Salmon-Safe, and Dan Kent, the executive director for Salmon-Safe. And I'm Ellen Southard. I am a strategic partner with the Seattle 2030 District, and I run the stormwater program. I did want to remind folks that today's session is AIA accredited, and Anne will be sending you, Anne Inamoto, who's also on our team here, our communications manager, will be sending you the information you need to register for the AIA credit. So thank you for that. And there will also be links throughout the day in the chat to some of the tools that will be helpful in meeting the 2030 District's Stormwater Challenge. So just a few things about the 2030 District. We are a NGO that is part of a network, a national network of 20 cities. We've got 260 buildings committed to our programs, and that means we've got about 60 million, maybe a little more, square feet of commercial office space within the district. The goal of the nationwide network is to create public-private partnerships that aim to break down market barriers to building efficiency in our case, in downtown Seattle and surrounding neighborhoods. And again, our focus includes climate resiliency. Our three benchmark programs are energy, water, and transportation. I'm going to ask folks to mute if they would. So please mute your audio. Thanks very much. Anyhow, again, our three benchmarks, energy, water, and transportation. Today, we're mostly talking about water itself and using the Salmon-Safe tool. Our goal is to achieve 50% reduction in energy, water, and transportation emissions across the district by the year 2030. And we want to highlight two things. When it comes to stormwater, we were the first district in the country to add stormwater as a key concern and a key program. And at the same time, we were working on transportation electrification and showing the links between driving gas cars and stormwater runoff, as well as the harm that tire dust and brake dust causes to our salmon populations here in Puget Sound. And that is primarily a chemical known as 6-PPD. And Dan will mention later in the session the work that Salmon-Safe is doing around 6-PPD. I also wanted to mention to our members and guests that are working on projects, Salmon-Safe has a strong tool available on their website that helps you discern how Salmon-Safe complements other building certifications, really focusing again on water quality and helping to recover the salmon populations here in Puget Sound. So it's really a guide that's meant to address how the framework complements other certifications that are part of our permitting priorities here in Seattle. And she's going to touch on that a little bit in her presentation as well. And then just really want to remind folks how interconnected different marketplaces are with the built environment. And here in Washington State, our economy is really robust when it comes to commercial fishing and shellfish fishing. Commercial and shellfish fishing adds 200,000 jobs in Washington State and $14 billion in state revenues. And that does not include tribal fishing. So keeping our water clean and playing a role in the built environment in terms of protecting water quality is key to the success of salmon recovery and to supporting Puget Sound. And then, of course, there's the issue of cultural identity and recognizing the importance that clean water and salmon play to our indigenous communities and the people of the Saley. Our local tribes have been here for hundreds of years, and they depend on clean water for their historical practices and for their main economy, which is salmon fishing. I'm very proud to say that at the Seattle 2030 District, we have a new partnership with the United Tribes of All Indians. It's an exciting project that will be located at South Lake Union. It's the United Tribes Canoe Carving House. We're working with them to fund a 3,000 square foot Camas Prairie green roof as a demonstration project within the district. It will be the most biodiverse green roof downtown and will treat close to 70,000 gallons of runoff each year with 15,000 plants in the roof. So that project hopefully will start construction in the spring, and we will be part of leading tours and developing an education curriculum with the United Tribes. And then let's not forget our food systems. So obviously, important part of the district is Pike Place Market, where people go to buy salmon and have a salmon experience, and all kinds of shellfish and other marine species that are edible to come as tourists, and also where we shop for our food. And Washington State Department of Ecology has reported that 32% of adults in the state of Washington eat salmon every week. So we want to make sure that we have healthy salmon for people to eat and to enjoy from a tourism perspective, which is important again to our economy. And then again, species survival is critical to the way of life here in the Pacific Northwest. Too many salmon remain on the brink of extinction, and time is running out. The climate change, rivers are warming, habitat is diminishing, and ocean acidification is escalating in our natural systems that support salmon in the Pacific Northwest, and they need our help now. We're here today to motivate people who work, live, and design projects and develop projects in the 2030 District's watershed to take action supporting salmon recovery needs and priorities as quickly as possible. And Salmon-Safe is the best possible tool you could be using to do that. And last but not least, just want to remind people again, I mentioned interconnectedness in the early part of my remarks. Salmon are critical to the survival of the orcas. Salmon make up 92% of the orca diet. And so when we can save the salmon, we can save the orcas, and it starts with clean water. So with that, I'd like to turn things over to my colleague, Anna Huttel, who is the certification manager for Salmon-Safe.
Thank you, Ellen. And before I launch into my slides, we wanted to share a short video that distills the spirit of Salmon-Safe and our work in Puget Sound, and also features a number of 2030 district members.
Thanks, Anna.
Both salmon and orcas are not only part of our environment and our ecology, which is a very important thing, they're a huge part of our community. There's everything from the fishmongers at Pike Place to the commercial fishermen that make a living off of it, to the Native American tribes who are spiritually connected to the orcas and the salmon.
People are starting to look in a mirror a little bit more and think about their values and the choices that they're making, and how where you live impacts not just yourself because you're living there, but impacts the environment.
There were a lot of facets of our business that we had never really thought of until Salmon-Safe came along and introduced some of these principles. The Salmon-Safe certifications really opened up a collaboration opportunity with us, our clients, and our design teams to really deliver ecologically restorative projects.
What makes Salmon-Safe unique is that it's not a checklist when it comes to certification. We really do approach each project in a different way because every project is unique, from the drawings to the planning, the actual development, construction, operations.
Salmon-Safe exists to extend a carrot to those who do want to follow the law. And in fact, even to go farther. Our standards are beyond code. They are pretty extensive. They're comprehensive. They cover all the areas that affect salmon, how well they can thrive in their habitat, what is needed to protect them and to recover them.
Every one of our buildings is covered in green roof. So that's the first step for us as far as water processing. Then as you move down the building with our decks and the plaza and all those areas, we have a very complicated system of bioswales, taking all that water, cleaning it, and then sending it off.
We've made it important that all of our development managers and construction managers and the broader group of the team are trained in what Salmon-Safe is. We have 17 properties certified at this point. Every property that we develop, it has been a great partnership with Salmon-Safe. With our partners becoming certified, they work with other developers in the industry who are not necessarily certified, but those principles carry over. We believe that it's really forcing the industry forward by hopefully being the leader in this.
For Unico, it's important to partner with expert organizations like Salmon-Safe to help take the extensive and emerging research on this topic and translate it into actions that we can implement. I think when you prioritize smart, sustainable design, you're doing right for your tenants, for your future tenants, for your investors, for the community and the neighborhood. And I think that's what matters. That's part of what sustainability is creating something that has a lasting impact and is improving our planet.
I really think about the beauty and the iconic nature of the Puget Sound and our local watersheds. Integral to that beauty is very much the health of our salmon populations, the health of our orca populations, the health of the marine life that we find in this region. Salmon-Safe has given us great guidance and tools to make sure that we are protecting those local watersheds.
The Salmon-Safe name is becoming more and more recognizable in the Northwest, and it's something that we like to promote.
For us, it's doing the right thing.
Well, hello, everyone. I'm Anna Huddle. I'm Salmon-Safe Certification Director, and I'll be providing background and context for the fantastic presentations that you'll hear next by providing an overview of Salmon-Safe's origins, programs, and a high-level review of Salmon-Safe's urban development principles and standards. Salmon-Safe is different than most certification programs and eco-labels you may know about. We were founded by Pacific Rivers, a river and native fish protection organization, with the goal of developing a market-based incentive to reward landowners for protecting water quality and habitat. We're now an independent, Portland-based nonprofit working through a network of place-based partners. And in Puget Sound, Stewardship Partners is our implementation partner. Salmon-Safe works across the range of Pacific salmon in North America, from Northern California through the Fraser Basin of British Columbia, and in recent years up in Alaska through an emerging partnership there. Salmon-Safe offers certification across a range of land types and management activities, from urban development and corporate campuses to municipalities and airports, light industrial to, of course, farms and vineyards, where Salmon-Safe got its start working with vineyards in Oregon's Willamette Valley. Salmon-Safe offers peer-reviewed standards across multiple sectors, from ultra-urban development in Seattle or Vancouver, BC, to agricultural sites. You can check out all of our standards at salmonsafe.org. Thanks, Anne. And for the purposes of today's presentation, I'll be focusing on our urban development certification standards as well as accreditation standards. In the couple of decades that we've been doing this work, we've seen huge strides forward in green building and sustainable agriculture and urban development, though not so much in ecological function and water quality protection. And that's Salmon-Safe's primary focus, whether the site is an international airport or a biodynamic vineyard. These 10 principles are the foundation for all of our certification and accreditation standards, including our urban development program. Connect to Watershed Context recognizes that every project is part of something bigger and looks for watershed-based considerations in development and planning decisions. Integrate Habitats looks to restore degraded habitat based on pre-development native species and ecosystems, as well as the future need for climate change adaptation. Start with Site Ecology asks teams to approach landscape ecological systems as site infrastructure and incorporate them early in the design process. Design for Climate Resiliency considers potential climate change conditions, particularly related to stormwater and changes to peaks, seasonality, and volume. Protect Habitat and Water Quality during construction asks teams to implement construction site pollutant control and runoff protection measures that achieve zero sediment discharge. Manage stormwater at the source looks to disperse and infiltrate stormwater on site through green infrastructure approaches to reduce downstream impacts. Prioritize water conservation asks for consideration of rainwater harvesting systems to balance water budgets and limit water demand by installing native and adapted plant species. Care for the land over time is a commitment to low input land management practices, water conservation, and pesticide-free or integrated pest management practices in site maintenance. Clean Water for Community considers how every project has the potential to enhance community and public health alongside water quality protection and ecological goals, delivering environmental benefits while reducing economic stress on disadvantaged communities. And lastly, Design Learning Landscapes looks to take advantage of opportunities for interpretive signage or demonstration projects highlighting features that contribute to an ecologically functional urban landscape. There are 8 standards categories split between core standards that apply to all sites and then context-dependent standards categories, which apply only to sites with a water resource, such as a waterway, whether it's seasonal or constant, wetland or riparian zone that's either on or adjacent to the property that's seeking certification. Stormwater management focuses on how all stormwater that lands on the site is managed for both water quality and quantity treatment, with the goal of treating the maximum extent feasible. Salmon-Safe standards around the stormwater management fully support the Seattle 2030 district goal of a 50% reduction in annual stormwater runoff from the district baseline by 2030. Many new developments that seek Salmon-Safe certification in the Seattle area often achieve 80 to 90 or more percent treatment on site. Water use management looks at potable water use on the exterior of a project, so namely irrigation. And Salmon-Safe asks teams to minimize water demand through thoughtful plant selections, water reuse, and efficient irrigation systems with smart controllers. Here again, Salmon-Safe is aligned with the Seattle 2030 district goal of a 50% reduction in potable water use from the district baseline by 2030. Erosion prevention and sediment control looks at both construction phase pollution prevention as well as long-term erosion and sediment control, particularly on sites that have steep slopes. Then pesticide reduction and water quality protection and landscaping focuses more on long-term vegetation maintenance, again emphasizing integrated pest management practices. Enhancement of urban ecological function is hugely important in the urban landscape where we have lost so much vegetated cover and native species. The standards in this category look for teams to consider how they can maximize habitat and ecological function on site, while also linking to vegetated spaces off-site. The last core category is site climate resiliency planning, and this category asks design teams to consider all of the other standards in the context of a changing climate and how more extreme storm events may change the sizing of stormwater infrastructure, and on the flip side, how drought periods may impact planting selections and irrigation. In-stream habitat protection and restoration focuses on assessing the condition of an actual water channel or water body, including the stream bed and bank, water quality, and identifying opportunities for restoring or improving habitat. And then lastly, riparian wetland and locally significant vegetation protection and restoration focuses on measures taken to protect areas closest to surface water bodies, riparian vegetation zones, and wetlands. It also applies to areas that contain locally significant vegetation as identified during a site inventory. Thanks, Ellen. We recognize that every site is unique and our requirements are not prescriptive. They are unique to the opportunities and challenges presented by an individual site. We contract with an independent science team, and in the urban environment, that typically includes 3 key individuals: a civil engineer specializing in stormwater management, a scientist with a background in brownfield redevelopment and fish biology, and an urban ecologist. All of our standards are based in science and what is safe for salmon, and thus us humans too. And here's just a quick snapshot on the next slide of our independent science team in the field during a construction visit. So it's a very personal process that is very engaged with the design and development team. Salmon-Safe looks to get involved early in the design process, starting with participation in any sustainability or eco-charrettes, as well as providing a more formal pre-assessment drawing review at about the 50% DD stage. This provides a high-level check for alignment with Salmon-Safe standards at an early stage when design changes are still more easily incorporated. Following that, we move into what we call the full site assessment with our expert science team. We convene with key design and construction representatives to get a holistic understanding of the project, as well as how sustainability goals have driven the design and how challenges have affected the project. Following this in-depth conversation, the Salmon-Safe Science team walks the project site to understand how the standards apply to the project's unique characteristics. This process culminates in the delivery of a certification report that outlines areas where the project exemplifies Salmon-Safe standards, as well as any conditions for the project during its 5-year certification cycle. Once an owner commits to meeting these conditions, certification becomes official. So using this fast track process, a project can receive or can achieve certification even in advance of construction. And on the next slide, you get a glimpse of what that Salmon-Safe certification report looks like. And I did just want to note that both new developments and existing sites are eligible for certification. While certification is site-based, Salmon-Safe accreditation is practice-based, meaning that a contractor, developer, or design firm commits to Salmon-Safe principles across all of its work, whether or not an individual project is certifiable. Salmon-Safe's first accreditation was for contractors working on large-scale construction projects. We recognized that some of the largest potential impacts can happen during this stage of the project and have sought to work with contractors to plan and then implement best management practices that completely avoid any runoff from a site. The developer accreditation program came next out of the demand from the marketplace for recognition and alignment with Salmon-Safe at a multi-project development scale. In this program, developers are able to positively influence just about everything related to their project's performance and set a high bar for Salmon-Safe compliance across its portfolio. And our newest accreditation program, again, came out of a desire from design firms that we were working with, asking how they could do more and help inspire others. Salmon-Safe accredited design professionals are infusing Salmon-Safe principles in every single project in their offices and serving as ambassadors for watershed health to other design consultants on the teams that they work with. Digging in just a bit on Salmon-Safe's expectations of contractors, they're asked to plan for construction site management that first emphasizes the complete elimination of site discharges. Where that's infeasible, they seek to greatly limit discharges, and if all else has been exhausted, then they work to reduce those discharges. This hierarchy is carried out through the use of extensive disturbance avoidance and isolation practices, such as limiting the construction work zone to the smallest footprint possible, and exposure limitation practices where potential contaminants are kept under cover. These practices apply not only to erosion and sediment, but to dewatering activities where, in some cases, advanced chemical treatment is required before dewatering effluent is discharged to a storm sewer or water body. An example of this focus on water quality protection during construction is a project midstream in development, the Microsoft Campus Modernization, just east of Seattle, which is Salmon-Safe certified and has a number of Salmon-Safe accredited contractors working on it, including GLY, Salin, and Skanska. This 72-acre construction site is one of the biggest projects Salmon-Safe has had seeking certification ever and joins a number of other tech campus projects around Seattle. In just a bit, you'll be hearing more from Bailey with Skanska about the practices that they deploy across all of their sites to ensure zero sediment runoff. For design professionals, we think there's a place to create beautiful projects with design for form and function, as well as watershed impact. Salmon-Safe accreditation for design professionals is a collaborative effort to engage architects, landscape architects, civil engineers, municipal decision makers, land use specialists, and sustainability consultants at a practice level and consistently applying environmentally innovative policies and procedures across their projects and at all stages of development, given individual project constraints. Salmon-Safe accreditation for design denotes an organization committed to conserving and enhancing the watershed in which its work is embedded. For design firms as well as developers, we start by learning everything there is to know about an organization and how they tick when it comes to sustainability, the design process, and benchmarking of projects through design and post-construction. This is accomplished through a review of any policies and protocols that exist, as well as an in-depth learning session with key staff. From there, we conduct a drawing review with a representative sampling of project typologies and sizes, gauging them against Salmon-Safe standards. This learning and drawing review process culminates in the delivery of an accreditation memo that summarizes where Salmon-Safe sees kudos or alignment with its principles and any conditions for continuous improvement for the organization to work on during its 3-year accreditation cycle. Towards the end of our program, you'll hear from Dan, who will be highlighting the accredited firms that have made this substantial commitment to watershed health. And with that, I'd be happy to hand it over to Kiki Graham with Vulcan. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Anna. I will try to follow up on that excellent presentation. I'm Kiki Graham. I'm a Senior Development Manager with Vulcan Real Estate. And as Alan mentioned, I serve on the 2030 District Board. Vulcan was a founding member of the 2030 District, and our real estate team has about 40 people with over 20 years of history of building in communities throughout Seattle. 90% of our completed projects have been in the 2030 District, and we're currently expanding our work into Bellevue. We focus on creating lasting value by developing spaces that are attractive from an economic, social, and environmental perspective. Next slide, please. Back in 2014, Salmon-Safe extended their oversight to real estate development. This opportunity aligned with Vulcan co-founders Paul Allen and Jody Allen's push to protect the environment. In 2015, we signed up as the pilot developer for this new initiative. In 2017, we became the first developer anywhere to achieve Salmon-Safe's developer accreditation. As Anna mentioned, the path to certification was built around 3 components: certifying our portfolio to date, establishing and implementing best practices for operating properties, and a public awareness campaign. Our ongoing commitment includes getting site certification for all of our new development sites, sharing our learnings and technology with others, and requiring general contractor partners to also be accredited by Salmon-Safe. Bailey will talk more in a little bit about the contractor's role. Next slide. Vulcan continues its leadership in environmental stewardship within the watershed where we work. So far, with our accredited partners, we've finished or started construction on 14 Salmon-Safe projects, and we have 8 more on the way. These include residential and office buildings in both Seattle and Bellevue. Next slide. As a Salmon-Safe certified developer, one of the commitments we made is to educate. For us, this means continuing to learn and explore new technologies that reduce our stormwater impacts, but also promoting the Salmon-Safe program and sharing completed projects and technologies with our community. In this slide, you can see here where last year we partnered with Salmon-Safe and King County Metro to display our work and promote our mission across 40 different Metro buses throughout the city, bringing awareness throughout our community and to the public of the work we're all doing. As Anna mentioned, it's important to start early, and Vulcan strategies start early during the design of the project and the planning. We've found so much of what we're able to do depends on the site specifics and what we have available to work with. Developing urban infill sites, we've found an opportunity to not only remove existing contaminants, but then to plan a project that will manage water use at the source by limiting demand. And we're also able to use drought-tolerant plantings and other green stormwater infrastructure best practices. Our work continues long after the project is completed as we manage and operate the property. By treating our stormwater and prohibiting the use of pesticides throughout our site, we're able to make sure we continue to reduce stormwater impacts. I wanted to share a few of our projects that we find notable and worth sharing. There are many, but one of the most, I think, visible ones, and one you're probably all familiar with, is the swale on Yale. This was a public-private partnership with Seattle Public Utilities, and this occurred over many phases. It started back in 2012. The goal was to improve the water quality of Lake Union and Puget Sound by treating the polluted runoff from almost 450 acres of area on the Capitol Hill streets and sidewalks. This runoff carries pollutants like oil, pesticides, fertilizers, grease, paint, and heavy metals. These all run off and end up into the lake and ultimately into the Puget Sound. The project was to complete a biofiltration project that would use plants and soils to treat nearly 200 million gallons of stormwater runoff before it entered the lake. Next slide. The reason this project is notable is because it was the first of its kind nationally, and that's because it was the retrofit of an existing system. The construction for the first phase of the project, as I said, began back in 2012, And that included the installation of 2,000 feet of pipes and vaults to divert the stormwater to the swales for pretreatment and then for ultimately the cleaning. The pretreatment included equipment that would remove trash and other solids from the water before it went through the bioswales. In later phases, the swales were installed in the right-of-ways adjacent to and with the construction of two of Vulcan's projects. The Staff House Apartments was completed back in 2013 and the Sitka project in 2019. The two swales are each about 270 feet long and range from 10.5 to 16.5 feet wide, depending on what right-of-way we had available to use. These plants now remove 90% of the contaminants before discharging the water into Lake Union. And the city, with assistance by Herrera and other consultants, are able to study how well these are working and make tweaks and adjustments as needed to the composition of the swales. This project is Sitka Apartments that I wanted to share, and this is one of the projects that we completed along with the construction of the final phase of the swale on Yale. It's a residential apartment project with 384 residential units. And in this early rendering, you can see the swale runs the length of the project along the right-of-way. And so it's interesting, you'll see there's no street trees or parking on this side. That was part of the partnership here with the city, was to convert what otherwise would have been planted with trees with this swale. This project, to achieve Salmon-Safe certification, we implemented the following stormwater management features. The project has a large cistern which collects rainwater for on-site irrigation, which allows us to use collected gray water to water our plants. The green roofs distributed throughout the project retain and create habitat, reducing the hardscape and roof water collection needs. The remaining roof drainage is directed to one of 5 bioretention planters, providing stormwater treatment during the capture and infiltration of water runoff. During the construction of this project, we were also able to remove 15,000 tons of contaminated soil during the construction, resulting in improved soil and groundwater quality. This project also implemented the first in the country wastewater heat recovery plant, reducing our energy usage. Another case, so here's a couple more pictures, just showing this is inside the Sitka Apartments. You can see some of the landscaping and some of the planters where we have a lush courtyard. And you can see again some images from the swale and bioretention. Another project I wanted to share with you is our Arbor Blocks project. This was 2 new buildings for Facebook, totaling 195,000 square feet. And this includes the planted and pedestrian-friendly Woonarf along 8th Avenue, which replaced the regular streetscape. To reduce watershed impacts, this project features green roofs. There's a total of 23,000 square feet across the 2 buildings. And this, along with the non-infiltrating bioretention planters, manage stormwater from approximately 75% of the new or replaced impervious surfaces. The diverse vegetation planted also allows for a better habitat for our birds and our bugs. This was another public-private partnership with the city, and this one particularly with SDOT. We were able to replace the former 8th Avenue, and as you can see here and on the next slide, this kind of meandering street called a Woonarf, which it reduces the desire to drive through here, but also encourages pedestrian use, biking, seating, and walking throughout it. It also provides the opportunity for a lot more green space and habitat restoration, along with we were able also to preserve the existing trees. So we designed around that. Additional measures to reduce water consumption include the use of native and drought-tolerant plantings, reducing the need for extensive irrigation, the use of low-flow fixtures throughout the building, and then ultimately the use of high-efficiency irrigation equipment. So using bubblers and drip irrigation so that we aren't wasting water as we water what plants require additional treatment to be sustained. By working with our Salmon-Safe accredited contractor on this project, we're also able to apply the best construction site management practices achieving zero sediment runoff. I have one more case study I wanted to share, and this one is a little bit outside the district. It's in the central area in Seattle, but for us, this is a notable project and one I think worth talking about. This site replaced, or the two projects that total 532 units, replaced 4 acres of paved and hardscape site. All of the stormwater runoff was untreated. So we felt like this was a great case study and a great example and something worth sharing. We were able to treat 90% of our stormwater generated on site now using an extensive system of bioretention planters capturing the roof runoff. We're able to filter 653 and 600 gallons, don't quote me on the exactness of that, that obviously came from civil, of rainwater annually. Now that the project's open and operational, we have committed through the Salmon-Safe program to not using pesticides in our landscape management. And we're pleased to announce that we were able to build a pollinator garden where a streetscape used to exist for people and our pollinators to enjoy. On the next slide, I just wanted to give you a quick shot of what this site looks like now with 2 buildings, and you can see the amount of green space throughout. I think we were able to preserve about 36% of the site area as pedestrian friendly and open and planted in green space. And on the left, you'll see these bioretention planters are really distributed throughout the site in the courtyards and throughout the perimeter and through the through block in the building. If you're not familiar with bioretention planters, they're kind of a big planter box that slows the runoff of the water so that it doesn't overwhelm our storm systems. And it also has planted with soils and plants that'll help treat to remove impurities from the water. There's 57,000 square feet of bioretention planters throughout the Jackson Apartments site. Next slide, please. And I just wanted to wrap up with something that I have found to be interesting. And as Ellen talked about previously, Salmon-Safe is a complementary program to the LEAD program that we're all very familiar with. There are some differences between the two, but they really work in concert together. The Salmon-Safe is complementary and it's focused primarily on quality of stormwater. LEAD is really focused on quantity. And so these are 2 different things between the two, and I think they showcase how they work together. Salmon-Safe layers on to LEAD by challenging developers to think comprehensively about the health of the watershed on a project-by-project basis and on an ongoing life cycle basis of how the project will continue to work and operate after construction is completed. Thank you. And with that, I will pass this on to Bailey, who will talk a little more about the construction process and role.
All right, can you see me and hear me? I'll take that as a yes.
Yeah.
You're in, Bailey. Thank you.
Perfect. Hello, everybody. My name is Bailey. I am a sustainability engineer working for Skanska out of our Seattle office. And I'm going to be speaking about Skanska's construction practices out of the building aspect of our company. And then my colleague Anthony will be talking from the commercial development side of Skanska. So Skanska ties into Salmon-Safe. We are and we're the first Northwest-wide accredited contractor. So we're accredited both in the Seattle and Portland offices for Skanska. And we were accredited since 2019. And we have been using our knowledge and best practices that we've gained here in the Pacific Northwest to influence a lot of our construction practices throughout the country, I would say. That's implementing pollutant control and runoff protection measures on our job sites with the goal of zero sediment runoff on all of our projects. So I'll be talking about a little bit of how we do that on the construction side of things. So with construction phase stormwater management, we work with our site logistics practices when we're just setting up our project sites. Just on I think Anna mentioned it earlier, minimizing the size of our construction sites as much as possible, and then minimizing the number of construction entrances. Another detail to add to construction entrances is adding riprap or tire mats or steel plates in and out of our construction sites to help control what is leaving our job sites. We also work to minimize ground disturbing work. And if we are disturbing groundwork with earthwork practices, rapidly stabilizing any soil areas that we are disturbing. So whether that, in the example in that photo, is like a plastic sheeting on any exposed earthwork materials, is just one example of what that is. And then I know this was already mentioned too with dewatering management practices, having sediment tanks or sediment ponds on our job sites. And if you're not familiar with what that practice entails, it's helping filter particles from water that either comes from dewatering of like stormwater that occurs on our job site, or if we are contacting a water table with our earthwork practices, how we are starting to filter all of that water we have from our job sites before emptying basically that water into the storm drain. So water will get sucked into these sediment tanks and then flows through multiple tanks at different rates, providing some degree of purification where the solids can accumulate at the bottom of the tanks more as sludge, and that all of those pollutants and dusts aren't heading straight into the stormwater system. The next slide is dust, sediment, and management control. So obviously there's a lot of dust and sediment on construction sites when we're starting a new or even demoing projects. So we use a lot of, we first of all clean our haul roads while under construction practices. So spraying water just to keep dust down and other pollutants within our job site boundaries. With aggregate and soil compaction, it's the same concept. And also with demoing, like spraying materials as if we are demoing any buildings in the on the site. We've also installed wheel washes on some of our job sites, again, just trying to contain any sediment and dust and any other particles and pollution on our job sites and within our boundaries of our site. And then we use a lot of sediment runoff control practices. So that one picture, the two pictures on the bottom, in the middle, and on the right are examples of that. There's a silt fence in that middle shot. And then we have fabric filtration fabrics on a lot of our all of our storm drains around our site. And then there's also examples of straw wattles that we use to divert and control any runoff as well. The next picture shows an example of one of our job sites, and as mentioned previously, a lot of this ties into our practices for LEED as well, our LEED certifications. So this is an example of our temporary erosion and sediment control on our job sites. And this is a report that we have to produce for LEED, but it also ties in with Salmon-Safe. You can see that little orange dot is a street sweeper. So again, trying to emphasize keeping dust, sediment, other pollutants on our job site and keeping it off the roadway, ending up in the storm drains. Our temporary construction entrance on this job specifically was steel plates and crushed aggregate, a combination of those two, trying to clean off tires a little bit as they're entering and exiting our job sites. And then the other arrow on the right is pointing to our sediment filtration tank for this job site as well. The next slide talks about Salmon-Safe practices that we do for certifications, and being an accredited contractor also ties into Skanska's best safety practices. A lot of this is kind of like a 2-in-1. Secondary containment for any fuel containers on site. So that's any stationary fuel or equipment. We always have a secondary containment as in an effort to avoid any leaking or oil coming out of material in our equipment. The middle picture is an example of an equipment diaper. That is the technical term that I'm told. And it's putting it under equipment, and it's more for mobile equipment. And it's a 2-in-1. It helps, again, protect any oil leaks or other fluid leaks from our equipment, but then also helps protect any finished surfaces or other finalized aspects of the construction site. We also always have environmental spill kits on every one of our job sites. And that ties into Skanska's ISO 14001 certification. Basically, that assures environmental impact is being measured and improved throughout effective environmental management system. So once quarterly, this is an internal audit that we as Skanska conduct on all of our job sites to ensure that we are following our proposed safety plans and practicing our environmental practices like the temporary erosion and sediment control practices or stormwater pollution prevention plans. We've also worked with Salmon-Safe to come up with Salmon-Safe approved de-icers. So that ties into safety as well, having our employees on our job sites safe when weather gets cold or things get icy, and understanding that the chemical composition of de-icers can greatly impact aquatic health and either be toxic to aquatic health or damage vegetation around that helps liquid filter stormwater. So we've come up with this list and we share it with all of our projects and all of our superintendents to emphasize a highly targeted application of the calcium magnesium acetate is the specific type of de-icer to use, and it's just minimizing the quantity, minimizing the number of applications, and minimizing the area coverage necessary. So just being the most efficient as possible with applying the de-icers and also maintaining safety. And then lastly, an example of how Skanska also works with the designers on all of our job sites, just in supporting the review of the design. So ensuring that there's no galvanized steel in the exterior of structures is something that we look into when we're reviewing drawings or submittals for the project, and then emphasizing green stormwater infrastructure like rainwater gardens or cisterns on site, or minimizing impervious surfaces, and an effort to maintain existing vegetation cover in an effort to reduce the discharge quantity through infiltration and evaporation of runoff after like construction is completed and it's an existing building. I'm going to be passing it off to my colleague Anthony now to talk more about the commercial development side.
Thank you, Bailey. Good afternoon. I'm Anthony Tran. I'm a development associate with the Commercial Development Business Unit of Skanska. Our experience with Salmon-Safe started with our project, The 8, which is a 25-story office project currently under construction over in downtown Bellevue, outside of the district. And on The 8, working with Salmon-Safe and the Salmon-Safe science team, we were able to take a critical look at our design stormwater infrastructure and integrate many of the Salmon-Safe standards. The team helped us identify a couple of small changes in our design that really improved the quality of the stormwater as it flowed through our project. These changes they included drought-resistant plant species throughout our landscaping, and replacing some drain assemblies with non-polluting materials that were in contact with the runoff. And so Salmon-Safe was really able to help us prevent pollution being introduced into the runoff, and also kind of looking at effective filtration through our landscaping. Additionally, as Kiki mentioned, having our Salmon-Safe certification has actually contributed additional innovation points towards our LEED certification, which was pretty helpful because we're pursuing LEED Platinum here. And because our commercial development projects, we act as both a developer and the general contractor. In the construction phase, we're already committed to a zero sediment runoff policy, as Bailey has previously described. Being our first commercial development project with Salmon-Safe, The 8 was a little late in bringing Salmon-Safe on into the design process. And using those lessons learned from that certification, we were committed to bringing Salmon-Safe on earlier to a proposed project we have within the district called K. K is a potential 31-story apartment project located in Belltown. And with K, Salmon-Safe really helped us focus in our design on reducing the total impervious surfaces, and they allowed us to take a critical look at our green stormwater infrastructure design. And specifically on this project, they helped us identify all the exterior materials that potentially was sending pollutants downstream, and really helped us focus on those climate resilient species in the green roof, the bioretention planters throughout the entire project. The review and certification with our designers was super smooth, and we were able to integrate those changes way early on, which was really great for us. Again, Kay is pursuing a LEED Gold certification, and having the Salmon-Safe team on board and going through the certification process has been a really great complement for our certification process for LEED as well. And with this one, we have no official start date, but when we do start construction, we're obviously fully committed to implementing the same best practices for construction runoff management that we do on all of our projects. And we're excited for how it will help us with our stormwater management goals. Next slide, please. At Skanska, one of our really big corporate goals is to be globally committed to building climate resilient urban spaces. So working with Salmon-Safe has been super beneficial and instrumental in reaching that goal. And with each of our projects, we focus on the long-term needs of each community. And we think that specifically here in the Pacific Northwest, committing to pursuing LEED and Salmon-Safe certification on our projects is critical to building that resilience against climate change, and specifically meeting those needs here within the district. Next slide, please. Our work with Salmon-Safe has actually inspired us to pursue a couple of additional initiatives to help manage stormwater in our projects. One of those is potentially using living green walls as job site fencing. We're currently kind of researching a way that we can use the lessons learned from the Salmon-Safe standards, exterior materials, biofiltration, to help with the stormwater treatment and help offset our carbon on a job site. And another initiative that we've been inspired to use is collecting and storing stormwater on the site during construction for use for non-potable construction activities like dust control. So we're pretty excited about these potential initiatives, and we really hope to work with Salmon-Safe on all of our projects in the Pacific Northwest moving forward. And we would encourage other developers as well to seek out Salmon-Safe and their certification process as well. Thank you. And speaking next is Dan Kent with Salmon-Safe.
Thanks, Anthony, and thanks to the 2030 District for the opportunity to present this session. And of course, Ellen, for being such a tireless champion for Puget Sound. And welcome everyone. And hope everyone can stay with us. We're right at 1 o'clock. Hopefully you can extend your lunch, maybe pour a glass of wine. Again, I'm Dan Kent, joining you from the very southern border of the Seattle 2030 District in Portland. Salmon-Safe's partnership with the 2030 District and all of the work you are hearing about in this session, our goal is really to inspire a shift in development to practices that protect Puget Sound. Today, you've heard great presentations from the innovators at Skanska and Vulcan. At Salmon-Safe, we're committed to leveraging their leadership to reach beyond early adopters to influence conventional development practices. And that's really the big challenge, and that is our focus moving forward. One of the ways we're doing that, in addition to our core certification programs, is through accreditation. And as you heard from Anna, we're accrediting developers, design firms, and large-scale contractors, all with the idea of scaling up a market shift through firm-wide adoption of Salmon-Safe principles. So first up, this slide, Salmon-Safe Design Accreditation. As you heard, it's our latest offering with designers committing to Salmon-Safe green infrastructure design. We're coming out of pilot phase with this project, and I can report that firms in Portland, Vancouver, BC, and Seattle all have achieved accreditation, including right there in the 2030 District, Methuen and Berger. Next, Ellen, thank you. And then next up, Salmon-Safe Developer Accreditation, you could say is the most exclusive of all of Salmon-Safe's offerings, with just 2 developers achieving accreditation across their project portfolios to date. And that, of course, is Vulcan, as well as fellow Seattle development firm Urban Visions. And I should note that a large-scale Oregon developer of affordable housing is working to be the first Salmon-Safe nonprofit developer. And we're excited about that initiative. Ellen, we can go forward. Thank you. Salmon-Safe Contractor Accreditation was our first accreditation program. Many of Puget Sound's leading contractors now committing to the zero sediment runoff goal you've been hearing about. Skanska being the first Pacific Northwest-wide Salmon-Safe contractor, and most recently, Corsmo Construction of Tacoma, just last month becoming our most recent Salmon-Safe accredited contractor. Shifting to certification, the great news today is that we're seeing the strongest ever market momentum towards developing salmon-safe projects. And I think that's in a large part because of the leadership of firms like Vulcan and Skanska, and really showing the market, leading the way. I wanted to share a few current projects to give you a sense of the innovation we're seeing in the 2030 district and broader Seattle area market. And we'll start with this image, Project S by Salmon-Safe developer Urban Visions. Our development standards are increasingly being applied at a campus development scale, and S is a great example of that. This is a 7-acre development site at the intersection of I-90 and I-5 in the Stadium District. The project includes 6 office buildings, and stormwater for the site is managed almost entirely on site through GSI. And in addition to Salmon-Safe, the project is seeking LEED Platinum certification. So again, that overlay of Salmon-Safe and LEED that you've been hearing about. Next in our tour of Salmon-Safe 2030 district projects in process is Liza, a multifamily apartment project in Seattle's Eastlake neighborhood by developer Pollard Entities. This is another project that almost entirely manages stormwater on site and also is engaged in the city's Living Building Challenge pilot. Longtime Salmon-Safe project newly recertified is the Seattle Children's Hospital campus. It's a 30-acre site above Lake Washington in the Laurelhurst neighborhood. Salmon-Safe's involvement with Seattle Children's has focused on campus-scale stormwater improvements and design of new development, which is ongoing on that campus, including this latest project, the recently completed Forest B. Roughly half of the main campus is open space, and Salmon-Safe also has guided planning for enhancements in site ecological function at the campus scale with Seattle Children's. Traveling east across Lake Washington, it's important to note that we're seeing a lot of new certification candidate projects in Bellevue and Redmond. One flagship project is B600. This is a 4-acre, 2-tower project in Bellevue that manages virtually 100% of stormwater on site. The project also includes an innovative gray water recycling system to provide water for indoor plumbing systems. With that, I wanted to shift gears and provide a couple of updates. First, on a note closely related to this urban development work, Salmon-Safe has engaged for more than a year now on the issue of tire dust runoff. And Ellen mentioned this in her introductory remarks, 6-PPD, killing coho salmon and other aquatic life. If you haven't had a chance to view our joint science videos with Salmon-Safe BC, featuring WSU's Dr. Jen McIntyre, you can find those at salmonsafe.org. And thanks, Anne, for placing that link in the chat. The first reporter that called the Salmon-Safe office a couple of years ago, when that very first University of Washington WSU landmark 6-PPD science study was published, asked, "So when are you going to be certifying Salmon-Safe tires?" And the answer, of course, is that there isn't a fish-friendly tire on the market. But in the meantime, we're working to strengthen the Salmon-Safe standards to really address mitigation measures for 6-PPD runoff, and also partnering with WSU in economic research, looking at consumer preferences, quantifying consumer preferences for a fish-friendly tire, so we can take that information to the tire industry and hopefully accelerate the transition to a fish-friendly tire. And finally, Anna had mentioned Salmon-Safe certifying lots of other sectors. A lot of the work we do is agricultural, in addition to this urban development work. And I thought I'd wrap up by noting that it's fresh hop season here in the Pacific Northwest, and there is an absolute ocean of Salmon-Safe certified beer brewed in Seattle that sources Salmon-Safe hops and malts, including Southern Resident IPA from Two Beers Brewing. In closing, the kind of actions being promoted by 2030 district goals around stormwater and energy, and the construction and development practices pioneered by Vulcan and Skanska, all are going to be essential to maintain healthy urban watersheds in this time of accelerating climate impacts and so many other environmental challenges. My call to action message for us today is straight from our bus side campaign with Vulcan last summer. Orcas need salmon, salmon need clean water. Please consider joining the Salmon-Safe developers in building a cleaner Puget Sound. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone. What a great panel. So pertinent to the work that we're doing here in the 2030 district. I'm going to stop sharing the screen now so that we can see each other's faces and have a discussion, answer questions. So going to welcome everyone back. Thank you for everyone who can stay. And we've got our panel for another 20 minutes if you'd like to ask questions and share ideas.
Hey, I have a question.
Hi,
This is
Branson.
Hi, Branson Brinton with Heartland and Laird Norton companies. I've been involved somewhat with Salmon-Safe in terms of some of our existing projects and getting them certified. And the accreditation process is new to me. Our company does a lot of consulting with real estate companies. So our clients are property owners, our developers, Port of Seattle, lots of different organizations. But we don't really fit very nicely into the category of developer or designer. And I was just wondering if you have some insight into what we might be able to do to obtain some sort of accreditation.
Yeah, thanks, Branson. I could tackle that, or Anna. Maybe I'll start. And
Go for it, Dan.
Great, sounds good. Well, first of all, huge shout out to Laird Norton. We have been partnering with Laird Norton on the first portfolio-wide existing office park assessment project in multiple states. And that's really, it's been a learning experience for Salmon-Safe, and I think will inform our certification programs. And we're also thinking accreditation programs. I think, Branson, your point about not quite fitting in developer, contractor, or designer accreditation is really valid. I mean, we've seen an opportunity even in terms of real estate management accreditation being a potential initiative. So certainly something that we're thinking about. And we do want to be market responsive. And as Anna had mentioned, each one of these accreditation programs has really been driven by market interest. So it's great to know that there is interest in that approach. Anna, I don't know if there's more you would add.
Yeah, I would just say that, we've had this experience of using perhaps hybrid programs on the certification side, particularly in our work with municipalities where we draw a bit from urban development standards, a bit from infrastructure, and a bit from parks. And so, to the outside world for our accredited firms, we're not specifically calling out all the time that they're an accredited developer, an accredited designer or contractor. It's simply that they're Salmon-Safe accredited. So perhaps there's space to look at a hybrid evaluation using more than one accreditation standard and exploring that with you all, Branson.
That'd be great. Thank you. I appreciate that. I'll reach out separately.
I see our executive director, Daniel Popey, has a question for you.
Hi, yeah, thanks so much, everyone, for coming out and talking to us about Salmon-Safe. This is a question for our one of our fearless leaders on our board, Kiki. Kiki, I was wondering if you could just give us a little more insight into how the public-private partnership for the Swale on Yale worked in terms of the process and the investment side of it. Just any thoughts you can share on that, because I know that some of those can be some of the big considerations for folks when considering projects like this.
Sure. I wish the initial answer I could give was that it was super easy and it just happened. But what I can tell you is it took years and years of planning and back and forth as to how it would actually work. And I think part of that had to do with how complex it was to retrofit an existing system. What I can tell you is that once it was finally determined who would do what, the way that it worked is that when you develop a project, you've got right-of-way improvements as part of your street improvement process. So you get a SIP for this work. And often that means you're replacing the curbs, the sidewalks, you're putting in new plantings, and you're providing public benefit at the end of the day, right? So you're beyond your property lines, you're doing this work. What we were able to do at the request of the city and in working with them was evaluate what our financial contribution to that kind of public benefit was for the project, right? So what we would otherwise spend on replacing parking spaces, repaving the roads, putting in the new curbs, the sidewalks, you know, the irrigation, the trees, the plantings, oftentimes there's seating, bike racks, and other things. Taking the total kind of value of what that cost that would be spent on the project was and applying it to this kind of goal that both the city had as well as us in improving our stormwater runoff. And so we were able to make that financial contribution to the construction of the swales. So the other piece of this is that the contractor that we work with, for example, on the Sitka project was Excel, and they built the project and they built the swale, but the swale was managed under a separate contract through the city. So SPU managed that contract with them, although we were all involved because they occurred at the same time. So there was a lot of collaboration that happened to get them to work with the project and well as the timing and the completion and the sign off. So while it was completed with the right-of-way improvements for the project, it was managed under a separate GMP and contract with the same contractor. I hope that helps a little bit. I think that the takeaway is there are opportunities for public-private partnerships, and they do take some time, I think, to figure out, and some creative thinking. The 8th Avenue Woonert was also a public-private partnership, and when you're doing something innovative and something new, it takes time to figure it out. But if you have those ideas, I'd encourage you to approach the city, or if the city approaches you, hear what they have to say. Thanks, Daniel.
Yeah, thank you, Kiki.
Thanks, Kiki. I would like to add too, if anyone knows about any projects that are interested in public-private partnerships, the Seattle 2030 district does have some funding through Boeing to help facilitate conversations with jurisdiction and compliance agencies, and we'd be happy to get involved with that. So please feel free to reach out to Daniel or to me. But we are looking for new public-private partnerships within the district, including sites such as the one I mentioned at the beginning of our session that had elevated highway in Fremont. So keep that in mind. Are there others who have questions, need help with a project?
I have a sort of a low level functionality question about the bioswales and retention planners, and I don't know why I haven't ever thought of this question before, honestly. Those are acting as filters and they're capturing contaminants before they can head to the sound. What does that do to the sort of the shelf life or longevity of the plants in those swales and containers and whatnot, and the soil? Like, does that have to be, do those plants have a shorter life expectancy in comparison? Is there the plant health compromised? And does that soil eventually become saturated in such a way that it needs to be replaced? And how does that work? And maybe this isn't the right forum for this question.
No, that's a great question, Dana. Go ahead.
I have to say, I could speak a little bit to it. I'm not a civil or landscape architect or engineer, but what I do know from our projects is that the plants are carefully selected to be able to withstand huge volumes of water. They kind of go through two extremes. And so the landscape architects work to select those vegetation and the plants to work within that. They get inundated with water at times, and at other times they have no water, little to no water. I think you asked an excellent question on the soils and the nutrients and how effective they are at, pre-treating and cleaning the water. And what's really interesting, I can post in here a link if you want, but the city does study their different swale projects. And so some studies from some earlier projects up north yielded that the kind of equation, let's say, of the soils and the plantings they had put in was not stripping out the coppers and some of the materials that they were trying to remove or had goals of removing. And they worked with Herrera to do some of these studies. And they found that they had to kind of rejigger the mix of what went into it, and to add these, they could add these to the bioswales rather than having to remove them and redo them. So by changing kind of the composition and adding this additional layer on, they were able to remedy that. And so by the time we did put in the swales at Sitka, we had that knowledge and the benefit of kind of their post-evaluation study. So they were able to tweak the mix a little bit. And I don't know, since we completed in 2019, if it's been studied again. I would expect that would be the plan, but I don't know. But they are able to modify or test and then upgrade those soils without having to redo. So that's a little bit I know.
Yeah, I want to point out too that Aaron Clark just popped a study into the chat that you can pull a link from. And I also want to mention, in our first phase of bioswales underneath the Aurora Bridge, Salmon-Safe did do testing at phase 1. It's a six chamber bioswale, and at just 3 chambers, the stormwater and the soils, the microbial action of the soils removed 70% of the contaminants. And that was about a year into the a little over a year into the operations of that bioswale. And the reason why we're only able to test at chamber 3 was because the soil was doing its work and holding that stormwater, and then it was transvaporating and replicating natural systems as it should. So there's some quick answers to that. Do folks have other questions? If you don't mind indulging me, I had a question for Bailey and Anthony. I'm really excited about this green wall idea and wondering, what your plans are once a construction project is completed. What will you be doing with those green wall panels?
Yeah, so potentially, if we're able to integrate it early on in the design, it's something that could live in the project permanently. We don't currently have that plan for K or our other projects, but I think going forward, there's the potential for that. Or we could use that same living wall fence for another project or other areas as well.
Great, thanks, Anthony. And Daniel just popped another question into the conversation. So I'll yield this one to Bailey. Where Skanska is concerned, some urban sites are smaller and they like urban infill sites like you would find in the 2030 district, and they don't trigger all of the same compliance review as, say, a larger site. And I'm just wondering, how do you apply the Salmon-Safe standards on the smaller urban sites?
As an accredited contractor, we apply Salmon-Safe standards on all of our job sites, just doesn't matter the size. It's part of our commitment. And then, as it was touched on, it also ties in with any LEED certification that we are pursuing as well for an additional LEED point. So it doesn't really matter the size, we're doing it.
Great, thanks, Bailey. Do others have questions? Hi, Jennifer.
Hi, Ellen. I wanted to follow up on Dana's question because I understood her question a little bit differently, and it's something that I think about. Also, what I was reading into her question was a little bit different. Once the bioswales, the bioremediation has been working for a certain amount of time, you would think that that soil would sort of fill up with pollutants and the plants would be denuded. And at what point are there studies happening now? And I would imagine there are, but how often do those plants and that soil, does it need to be replaced? And what do we then do with the soil, that soil, once it has collected all of those contaminants?
That is what thank you.
Okay, that's a good question. Thanks, Jennifer. So I'll take one stab at it, since we've worked on quite a lot of, at Site Story, we've worked on quite a lot of bioswales and parking lots. but it's amazing that what the soils do. So engineered soils with their microbial action and with different additives such as calcium and different amendments, just basic compost, oftentimes will do this work for 5 to 10 years, and it really comes down to what pollutants are ending up there and also what plants are being used. So veiny plants like ferns tend to do more work than certain other plants. So it really comes down to the design, but also what pollutants are in there. Now, we don't have a great way of dealing with the soils. So basically, any soils that have contaminants are carted off. They're taken to a soil cemetery would be how I might describe it. And oftentimes the contaminants are burned off and then the soil is sold and reused. But unfortunately, that is the process that we have in place right now. Aaron, I'm going to turn to Aaron, who is an expert on bioswales and rain gardens, to see if he knows of any other solutions that might be more eco-friendly.
Cool. Well, thanks, Ellen. I appreciate that. Yeah, the question, it is a good one, and it's one that is being actively studied. The link I sent, second of the two links I put in the chat a few minutes ago, I saw a report out from that study from Jen McIntyre, and they've simulated up through 10 years of bioinfiltration with 18 inches of soil in these test columns using standard sort of rain garden bioretention soil. And the results they've got so far, and I think they're planning to extend this into a simulated 20-year study, so they're basically accelerating, pretending like it's been 10 years, taking 10 years worth of highway runoff, so the dirtiest of the dirty you can get. And after I think about 6 years, they saw some diminishment of function. So the soil started to clog. And what they did to rejuvenate them was remove the top 1 inch. And they never saw a depletion in functionality of the soil. The water that came through was still reducing pollutants significantly all the way through the 10 years, especially with this relatively minor after 6-year rejuvenation of soils, just scraping the top inch off and replacing it. So that was a report I heard yesterday, so it's still pretty fresh, and I think there's quite a bit more analysis to do. But there's definitely biological activity in these soils. These are living systems, and those little buggers that are down in the soil are actually eating some of the pollution. They're taking up the metals, turning them into enzymes. They're taking up the hydrocarbons and eating them as food. So there is actual consumption of some of the pollutants, and then some things do accumulate, but we haven't seen much in the way of accumulation in soils to a point where the soils get toxic. And I think the first link I sent, which was a great article by Lisa Stifler several years back, summarizing ecology and EPA research, estimated that it would take close to 75 years for soils to reach a level of saturation where they would have so many toxins in them that you couldn't grow food in them legally, which actually, that's not what we're trying to do in most of these cases. So I think there's a lot of optimism here that these systems can function for a very, very long time with a reasonable amount of maintenance, but there's still a little bit more, and we should all keep our eyes on that WSU study for sure.
Great, thanks, Aaron. That was a great answer. I want to be cognizant of time. We have 1 minute left in our intended programming. Does anyone else have a question, comment, thoughts about future projects with Salmon-Safe and the 2030 district? Okay, well, I can't thank you all enough. Anne is going to follow up with all of our participants. She'll be sending out, for one, the Salmon-Safe 10 principles poster, so you can all print it out and keep it at your desk to remind you of how to approach your projects. We're always available to our members and friends and colleagues who need technical assistance and want to be more involved with the 2030 district. and we look forward to seeing you soon. Please take the time, if you will, to fill out the education survey and tell us what you'd like to see for next year and how we can support you more from an education perspective. And just a big round of applause, virtual and otherwise, for our great panelists who are doing good work. And we're really proud to have all of you associated with the 2030 district. Thank you so much, and we look forward to seeing you again soon. Bye-bye.